Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more ancient lore. Today we are diving back into the works of Dante. This is the Divine Comedy. We are in Purgatory. This is Purgatorio Canto 26 to be specific. I accidentally left this one off yesterday, but accidents don't happen, and it was probably for a reason. We dealt with the nourishment of the soul as we ended yesterday. How can the soul here hunger even though it even like the sustenance isn't required, and yet it hungers. And we got into that. We talked a great deal about that. And now we're going to see what's left for the rest of the ascent up through purgatory. We should get close to the end today. We will be doing 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31. So let's dig in. Canto 26. Oh, Chris, by the way, I'm going to put this in here because almost nobody's going to see this, but the music's done. I'm almost there with the vocals. I'm working on it. It's coming. Purgatorio, Canto 26. While on the brink thus, one before the other, went upon our way, oft the good master said, Take thou heed, suffice it that I warn thee. On the right shoulder smote me now the sun, that, raying out already the whole west, changed from its azure aspect into white. And with my shadow did I make the flame appear more red, and even to such a sign, shades saw I many, and they went, Give heed. This was the cause that gave them a beginning to speak of me, and to themselves began they to say, That seems not a factitious body. Then towards me as far as they could come, came certain of them, always with regard not to step forth where they would not be burned. O thou who goest, not from being slower, but reverent perhaps, behind the others, answer me, who in thirst and fire am burning? Nor to me only is thine answer needful, for all of these have greater thirst for it than for cold water, Ethiop, or Indian. Tell us, how is it thou makest thyself a wall unto the sun, as if thou hadst not entered as yet into the net of death? Thus one of them addressed me, and I straight should have revealed myself were I not bent on another novelty that then appeared. For through the middle of the burning road there came a people face to face with these, which held me in suspense with gazing at them. There see I, hastening on either side each of the shades, and kissing one another, without a pause, content with brief salute. Thus in the middle of their brown battalions, muzzle to muzzle, one ant meets another, perchance to spy their journey or their fortune. No sooner is the friendly greeting ended, or ever the first footstep passes onward, each one endeavors to outcry the other. The new-come people, Sodom and Gomorrah. The rest, into the cow Pasiphae enters, so that the bull unto her lust may run. Then, as the cranes that to Ruffian mountains might fly and part towards the sand, these of the frost, those of the sun avoidant. One folk is going and the other coming, and weeping they return to their first songs, and to the cry that most befitteth them. And close to me approached, even as before, the very same who had entreated me, attent to listen in their countenance. I, who their inclination twice had seen, began. O souls, secure in the possession, whenever it may be, of a state of peace, neither unripe nor ripened have remained my members upon earth, but here are with me, with their own blood in their articulations. I go up here to be no longer blind. A lady is above, who wins this grace, whereby the mortal through your world I bring. But as your greatest longing satisfied may soon become, so that heaven may house you, which full of love is, and most amply spreads, tell me, that I again in books may write it, who are you, and what is that multitude which goes upon its way behind your backs? Not otherwise with wonder is bewildered the mountaineer, and staring round is dumb when rough and rustic to the town he goes. Then every shade became in its appearance, and when they of their stupor were disburdened, which in high hearts is quickly quieted, Blessed be thou who of our borderlands, he recommenced who had first questioned us, experience frightest for a better life. The foe comes not with us that The folk that comes not with us have offended, in that for which once Caesar, triumphing, heard himself called in contumely, Queen. Therefore they separate, exclaiming, Sodom! Themselves reproving, even as thou hast heard, and add unto their burning by their shame. Our own transgression was hermaphrodite, and because we observed not human law, following like unto beast our appetite. By our opprobrium, in our opprobrium by us is read, when we part company, the name of her who bestialized herself in bestial wood. Now, knowest thou our acts and what our crime was? Would thou perchance by name know who we are? There is not time to tell, nor could I do it. Thy wish to know me in sooth be granted. I'm Guido Guinciale, and now purge me, having repented ere the hour extreme. The same that in the sadness of Lycurgus 2 sons became, their mother re-beholding. Such I became, but rise not to such height. The moment I heard name himself the father of me and my betters, who had ever practised the sweet and gracious rhymes of love, and without speech and hearing thoughtfully for a long time I went, beholding him, nor for the fire did I approach him nearer. When I was fed with looking, utterly, myself I offered ready for his service with affirmation that compels belief, and he said to me, Thou leavest footprints such in me, from what I hear, and so distinct, let they cannot efface them, nor make dim. But if thy words just now the truth have sworn, tell me, what is the cause why thou displayest in words and look that dear thou holdest me? And I to him, those dulcet lays of yours, which, long as shall endure in our modern fashion, shall make forever dear their very ink. Oh, brother, said he, he whom I point out, and there he pointed at a spirit in front, was of the mother tongue a better smith. Verses of love and proses of romance he mastered all, and let the idiots talk, who think the Lamosan surpasses him. To clamor more than truth they turned their faces, and in this way established their opinion, ere by art or reason has by them been heard. Thus many ancients with Gittoni did, from cry to cry, still giving him applause, until the truth has conquered with most persons. Now, if thou hast such ample privilege, 'tis granted thee to go unto the cloister, wherein is Christ the abbot of the college. To him repeat for me a paternoster, so far as needful to us of this world, where power of sinning is no longer ours. Then, to give place perchance to one behind whom he had near, he vanished in the fire as fish in water going to the bottom. I moved a little towards him, pointed out, and said that to his name my own desire, an honorable place was making ready. He of his own free will began to say, Tan mea bellis vostre cotres teman, cujo non possec ni vuel al vos cabeer. Je suis un nom, que polor et va chantant, consideros ver la passara folor, el ve josun, la jaune que es perdonant. Ara vos preg per aquel valor, que vos conduce al som de la scalina, sovegna vos a temperar ma dolor. Then hid him in the fire that purifies them. So pleases me your courteous demand, I cannot and will not hide me from you. I am Arnaud, who, weeping and singing go. Contrite, I see the folly of the past, and joyous, see the hoped-for day before me. Therefore I do implore you by that power which guides you to the summit of the stairs, be mindful to assuage my suffering. And so ends Canto 26, yes. And so, this seemed to be dealing with some severe issues, right? I have a Bible study. If you're unaware, it's going to be linked up here. Apparently, I got to do that a lot today. But in that Bible study, we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah and what the real sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was. It was not the actual acts that were happening, kinda. It was the forcing of those acts upon other people. They had been doing those acts for a long time, and it wasn't a problem. But they were beginning to captured people and forced them to do it. And they even tried it with the angels. Go back and read the book. That is what happened. And that was the sin, right? They were forcing people to do these things. If it was about the sexual immorality, it would not have been okay for Lot to say, take my daughter instead, right? He would have been condemned for that if it was not. Anyway, we're not going to rehash that. I want some different beliefs on those things. Sexual deviance is a problem, right? You are meant to have a partner, not multiple, although most of us have, right? I was quite promiscuous in my youth, and I did not see the folly of my ways for a long time. You share energy with whoever you have sexual congress with, or whatever you have sexual congress with. That doesn't mean that you're going to impregnate them every time, or that they're going to impregnate you every time, but every single time you engage in the act of sexual congress, you are exchanging energies, and you will forever hold a piece of that in you. You may forget their face, you may forget their name, you may forget the act, and still one day it is still there, right? Like, that energetic exchange is permanent. And so you should be very careful with whom you exchange those energies. You should not be forcing those energies on anyone, because that definitely brings in some karmic repercussions. You shouldn't be doing it to animals. I know we shouldn't have to say that, but you do. Like, in my high school, we had a guy got caught with a goat. Literally caught. It was a billy goat. It wasn't even a nanny goat. We had another guy, he got caught with chickens. Like, people are terrible. Don't do terrible things. Those things are meant to fit in very specific places. And sometimes they fit in other interesting places, but they never are meant to fit into a different species. Ever. At all. Right? That should be well understood by anyone. Be very careful where you spread your energies. Don't partake in the things that Sodom and Gomorrah did, and for God's sake, don't do the things the other people did. You are meant to regulate your sexual desires. Everybody has them. You're supposed to have them. You're not supposed to completely abstain from them. You're not supposed to be willy-nilly wanking the woods either, right? You're supposed to be conservative in your energetic distributions. That's where we're going to leave that. Next up, Purgatorio 27. As when he vibrates forth his earliest rays in regions where his maker shed his blood, the Ebro falling under lofty Libra, and waters in the Ganges burnt with noon, and so stood the sun. Hence was the day departing when the glad angel of God appeared to us. Outside the flame he stood upon the verge and chanted forth, Beate mundo corde, in a voice by far more living than our own. Then no one farther goes, soul sanctified, if first the fire bite not. Within it enter, and be not deaf unto the song beyond. When we were close beside him, thus he said, Wherefore, Evan, such became I when I heard him as he who is put in the grave. Upon my clasped hands I straightened me, scanning the fire, and vividly recalling the human bodies I had once seen burned. Towards me turned themselves my good conductors, and unto me Virgilius said, My son, here may indeed be torment, but not death. Remember, and if I, on Geryon, have safely guided thee, what shall I do, now I am nearer God? Believe for certain, shouldst thou stand a full millennium in the bosom of this flame, it could not make thee bald a single hair. And if, perchance, thou think I deceive thee, draw near to it, and put it to the proof, with thine own hands upon thy garment's hem. Now, lay aside all fear, turn hitherward and onward, come securely, and I, still motionless, and 'gainst my conscience. Seeing me stand still motionless and stubborn, somewhat disturbed, he said, Now look thou, son, twixt Beatrice and thee there is this wall. As at the name of Thisbe, oped his lips the dying Pyramus, and gazed upon her what time the mulberry became vermilion. Even thus, my obduracy being softened, I turned to my wise guide, hearing the name that in my memory evermore is welling. Whereat he wagged his head and said, "How now? Shall we stay on this side?" Then smiled as one does at a child who's vanquished by an apple. Then into the fire, and in front of me he entered, beseeching Statius to come after me, who a long way before divided us. When I was in it, into molten glass, I would have cast me to refresh myself, so without measure was the burning there. And my sweet father, to encourage me, discoursing still of Beatrice, went on, saying, "Her eyes I seem to see already." A voice that on the other side was singing, directed us, and we, attent alone on that, came forth where the ascent began. Veniti benedicti patrias me, sounded with it within a splendor which was there, such it overcame me, and I could not look. The sun departs at it, and night cometh. Tarry ye not, but onward urge your steps, so long as yet the west becomes not dark. Straight forward through the rock the path ascended in such a way that I cut off the rays before me of the sun, that now was low, and of the few stairs we yet had made essay, ere, by the vanished sun, the sun setting behind us, we perceived, I and my sages. And ere in all the parts immeasurable the horizon of one aspect had become, and night her boundless dispensation held. Each of us a stair had made his bed, because of the nature of the mount took from us the power of climbing more than the delight, even as in ruminating passive grow the goats who have been swift and venturesome upon the mountain tops ere they were fed. Hushed in the shadow while the sun is hot, watched by the herdsman who upon his staff is leaning, and in leading tendeth them. And as the shepherd, lodging out of doors, passes the night beside his quiet flock, watching that no wild beast may scatter it, such at that hour were we, all three of us, I like the goat, and like the herdsman they, begirt on this side and on that by rocks. Little could there be seen of things without, but through that little I beheld the stars, more luminous and larger than their wont. Thus, ruminating and beholding these, sleep seized upon me, sleep that oftentimes before a deed is done has tidings of it. It was the hour, I think, when from the east, first on the mountain Cytherea beamed, who with the fire of love seemed always burning. Youthful and beautiful in dreams, methought, I saw a lady walking in a meadow, gathering flowers and singing. She was saying, "Know whosoever may my name demand, that I am Leah, and go moving round my beauteous hands to make myself a garland. To please me at the mirror, here I deck me, but never does my sister Rachel leave her looking glass, as sitteth all day long. To see her beauteous eyes as eager as she, as I am to adorn me with my hands. Her seeing and me doing satisfies. And now, before the antelucan splendors that unto pilgrims the more grateful rise, as home returning less remote they lodge. The darkness fled away on every side, and slumber with it. Whereupon I rose, seeing already the great masters risen. That apple, sweet, which through so many branches of care, the care of mortals goeth in pursuit of, the day shall put in peace thy hungerings. Speaking to me Virgilius of such words as these made use, and never were there guerdons that could in pleasantness compare with these. Such longing upon longing came upon me to be above, that at each step thereafter for flight I felt in me the pinions growing, when underneath us was the stairway all run over, and we were on the highest step. Virgilius fastened upon me his eyes, and said, "The temporal fire and the eternal, son, thou hast seen, and to a place art come where of myself no farther I discern. My intellect and art I here have brought thee. Take thine own pleasure for thy guide henceforth. Beyond the steep ways and the narrow art thou. Behold, the sun that shines upon thy forehead. Behold the grass, the flowerlets, and the shrubs, which of itself alone this land produces. Until rejoicing come the beauteous eyes, which weeping cause me to come unto thee. Thou canst sit down, and thou canst walk among them. Expect no more word or sign from me. Free and upright and sound is thy free will, and error were it not to do its bidding. Thee over thyself I therefore crown and mitre. And so ends Canto 27. And this is the ascension, right? This is, you have overcome, and part of that process is burning away the desires, right? Walking through the fire is definitely part of the process. It's a little bit different for people, right? There are accounts out there, but part of the ascension process, you will walk through the fire that does not burn. It's described here well enough that I don't really need to get into it in too much detail. There will be, in your process, a clear choice on whether you are going to trust the process or not. It manifests a little bit differently than with other people. Like, different people do it in different ways, but there is a step where you will have to release your free will, and then on the other side, you will actually understand exactly what free will is. Purgatorio, Canto 28. Eager already to search in and round the heavenly forest, dense and living green, which tempered to the eyes the newborn day. Withouten more delay I left the bank, taking the level country slowly, slowly, over the soil that everywhere breathes fragrance, a softly breathing air that no mutation had in itself. Upon the forehead smote me no heavier blow than of a gentle wind, whereat the branches, lightly tremulous, did all of them bow downward toward that side, where its first shadow cast the holy mountain, yet not from their upright direction swayed, so that the little birds upon their tops should leave the practice of each art of theirs, but with full ravishment of the hours of prime, singing received they in their mist of leaves that ever bore a burden to their rhymes, such as from the branch to branch goes gathering on through the pine forest on the shores of Chiasi, when Oleus unlooses the sirocco. Already my slow steps had carried me into the ancient wood so far that I could not perceive where I had entered it. And lo, my further course a stream cut off, which toward the left hand with its little waves bent down the grass that on its margin sprang. All waters on that earth most limpid are, would seem to have within themselves some mixture, compared with that which nothing doth conceal, although it moves on with a brown current, under the shade perpetual that never ray of the sun lets in, nor of the moon. With feet I stayed, and with mine eyes I passed beyond the rivulet to look upon the great variety of the fresh May. And there appeared to me, even as appears suddenly something that doth turn aside through very wonder every other thought, a lady all alone, who went along singing and culling flowerlet after flowerlet, with which her pathway was all painted over. Ah, beauteous lady, who in rays of love dost warm thyself, if I may trust the looks which the heart's witnesses are wont to be, may the desire come unto thee to draw near to this river's bank, I said to her, so much that I might hear what thou art singing. Thou makest me remember where and what Proserpina that moment was when lost her mother her, and she herself the spring. Persephone? As turns herself with feet together pressed and to the ground, a lady who is dancing and hardly puts one foot before the other. On the vermilion and yellow flowerlets she turned towards me, not in other wise than mountain maiden who her modest eyes cast down. And my entreaties made to be content, so near approaching that the dulcet sounds came unto me together with its meaning. as soon as she was where the grasses are, bathed by the waters of the beauteous river, to lift her eyes, she granted me the boon. I do not think there shone so great a light under the lids of Venus when transfixed by her own sun, beyond his usual custom. Erect upon the other bank, she smiled, bearing full many colors in her hands, which that high land produces without seed. Apart, 3 paces did the river make us, but Hellespont, where Xerxes passed across, a curb still to all human arrogance. More hatred from Leander did not suffer for rolling between Sestos and Abydos than that from me, because it oped not then. Ye are newcomers, and because I smile, began she, peradventure in this place elect to human nature for its nest. Some apprehension keeps you marveling, but the psalm, Delectasti, giveth light which has the power to uncloud your intellect. And thou, who foremost art and didst entreat me, speak if thou wouldst hear more, for I came ready to all thy questionings as far as needful. The waters, said I, and the forest sound are combating within me my new faith, and something which I heard opposed to this. Whence she, I will relate how from its cause proceedeth that which maketh thee to wonder, and purge away the cloud that smites upon thee. The good, supreme, soul in itself delighting created man good, and this goodly place gave him as hansel of eternal peace. By his default short while he sojourned here, by his default to weeping and to toil, he changed his innocent laughter and sweet play, that the disturbance which below is made by exhalations of the land and water, which, far as may be, follow after heat, might not upon mankind wage any war. This mount ascendeth towards the heaven so high, and is exempt from there where it is locked. Now, since the universal atmosphere turns in a circuit with the primal motion, unless the circle is broken on some side, upon this height that all is disengaged, in living ether doth this motion strike and make the forest sound, for it is dense, and so much power that the stricken plant possesses, that with its virtue it impregnates the air, and this, revolving, scatters it around. And yonder earth, according as 'tis worthy in self or in its clime conceives, and bears of diverse qualities the diverse trees. It should not seem a marvel then on earth, this being heard whenever any plant without seed manifest there taketh root. And thou must know this holy tableland in which thou art is full of every seed and fruit has in it never gathered there. The water which thou seest springs not from vein, restored by vapor that the cold condenses, like to a stream that gains or loses breath, but issues from a fountain safe and certain, which by the will of God as much regains as it discharges, open on 2 sides. Upon this side with virtue it descends, which takes away all memory of sin. On that of every good deed done restores it. Here Lethe, as upon the other side, Euone it is called, and worketh not, if first on either side it be not tasted. This every other savour doth transcend, and notwithstanding slaked so far may be thy thirst, that I reveal to thee no more. I'll give thee a corollary still in grace, nor think my speech will be to thee less dear, if I spread out beyond my promise to thee. Those who in ancient times have feigned in song the age of gold and its felicity, dreamed of this place, perhaps, upon Parnassus. Here was the human race in innocence. Here evermore was spring and every fruit. This is the nectar of which each one speaks. Then backward did I turn me wholly round unto my poets, and saw that with a smile they had been listening to these closing words. Then to the beautiful lady turned mine eyes. And so ends 28. And here we are getting a description of Eden, right? This is the paradise before men took the responsibility for their own life. It resides at the top of purgatory, right? You're not quite in heaven. That's interesting. You are at this point, this is where men were living on the pure subsistence of God. This was before the actual sin in Eden. Right? That is my taking away. That this is Eden, and this is the place that was, and now the earth is a reflection of, because we have the responsibility for our choices now. Purgatorio, Canto 29. Singing, like unto an enamored lady, she, with the ending of her words, continued, Beate coram tecta sum te peccata. And even as nymphs that wandered all along among the sylvan shadows, sedulous, one to avoid and one to see the sun. She then against the stream moved onward, going along the bank, and I abreast of her, her little steps with little steps attending. Between her steps and mine were not 100, when equally the margins gave a turn, in such a way that to the east I faced. Nor even thus our way continued far before the lady wholly turned herself unto me, saying, Brother, look and listen. And lo, a sudden lustre ran across on every side athwart the spacious forest, such that it made me doubt if it were lightning. But since the lightning ceases as it comes, and that continuing brightened more and more, within my thought I said, What thing is this? And a delicious melody there ran along the luminous air, whence holy zeal made me rebuke the hardihood of Eve. For there, where earth and heaven obedient were, the woman only, and but just created, could not endure to stay neath any veil, underneath which she had devoutly stayed. I sooner should have tasted those delights ineffable, and for a longer time, while mid such manifold first fruits I walked, of the eternal pleasure all enwrapped, and still solicitous of more delights. In front of us, like an enkindled fire, became the air beneath the verdant boughs, and the sweet sound as singing now was heard. O virgin sacrosanct, if ever hunger, Virgil's, or cold for you I have endured, the occasion spurs me their reward to claim. Now Helicon must needs pour forth for me, and with her choir Urania must assist me, to put in verse things difficult to think. A little further on, 7 trees of gold, in semblance to the long space still intervening between ourselves and them, did counterfeit. But when I had approached so near to them, the common object which the sense deceives lost not by distance any of its marks. The faculty that lends discourse to reason did apprehend that they were candlesticks, and in the voices of the song, Hosanna, above them flamed the harness beautiful, far brighter than the moon in the serene of midnight at the middle of her month. I turned me round with admiration filled to good Virgilius, and he answered me with visage no less full of wonderment. Then back I turned my face to those high things which moved themselves towards us so sedately they had been distanced by new-wedded brides. The lady chid me, Why dost thou burn only so with affection for the living lights, and dost not look at what comes after them? Then I saw people, as behind their leaders, coming behind them, garmented in white, with such a whiteness never was on earth. The water on my left flank was resplendent, and back to me reflected my left side, even as a mirror if I looked therein, when upon my margin had such posts that nothing but the stream divided us. Better to see, I gave my steps repose, and I beheld the flamelets onward go, leaving behind themselves the air depicted, and they of trailing pennons had the semblance, so that it overhead remained distinct with 7-fold lists, all of them the colors whence the sun's bow was made, and Delia's girdle. These standards to the rearward longer were than was my sight, and, as it seemed to me, 10 paces were the outermost part. Under so fair a heaven as I described, the 24 elders, 2 by 2, came on, in coronet with flower de luce. Among them they all of them were singing, Blessed thou among the daughters of Adam art, and blessed forevermore shall be thy loveliness. After the flowers and other tender grasses in front of me, upon the other margin were disencumbered of that race elect, Even as in heaven star followeth after star, there came close after them 4 animals, incarnate, each one with a verdant leaf. Plumed with 6 wings was every one of them, the plumage full of eyes, the eyes of Argus, as if they were living would be such as these. Reader, to trace their forms no more I waste my rhymes, for other spending press me so, that in this I cannot be prodigal. But read Ezekiel, who depicteth them as he beheld them from the region cold, coming with cloud, with whirlwind, and with fire. As such as thou shalt find them in his pages, such were they here, saving that in their plumage John is with me, and differeth from him. The interval between these 4 contained a chariot triumphal on 2 wheels, which by a griffin's neck came drawn along. And upward he extended both his wings, between the middle list and 3 and 3, so that he injured none by cleaving it. So high they rose that they were lost to sight. His limbs were gold, so far as he was bird, and white the others with vermilion mingled. Not only Rome, with no such splendor, car ever gladdened Africanus, or Augustus, but pour to it that of the sun would be, that of the sun which swerving was burnt up, at the importune horizon of earth, when Jove was so mysteriously just. 3 maidens at the right wheel in a circle came onward dancing, one so very red that in the fire she hardly had been noted. The second was as if her flesh and bones had all been fashioned out of emerald. The third appeared as snow, but newly fallen. And now they seemed conducted by the white, now by the red, and from the song of her the others took their step, or slow or swift. Upon the left hand 4 made holiday, vested in purple, following the measure with one of them with 3 eyes in her head. The rear of the group here treated of 2 old men I beheld, unlike in habit, but like in gait, each dignified and grave. One showed himself as one of the disciples of that supreme Hippocrates, whom nature made for the animals she holds most dear. Contrary care of the other manifested, with swords so sharp and so shining and so sharp it caused terror to me on this side of the river. Thereafter 4 I saw of humble aspect, and behind all an aged man alone, walking in sleep with countenance acute. And like the foremost company, these 7 were habited, yet of the flower de lucy no garland round the head they wore, but of the rose and other flowers vermilion. At little distance would the sight have sworn that all were in a flame above their brows. And when the car was opposite to me, thunder was heard, and all that folk August seemed to have further progress in detected. There, with Vineyard inward ensigns standing still. And so ends Canto 29. And this is an imaginings, right? I don't think that there is a deeper esoteric teaching in here. I could be wrong, but this seems to be, we're back into, or we're beginning the wrap up, right, of the purgatory. And so I think we are walking the river that divides purgatory from heaven, right? I think that that's what's happening. We're slowly going upstream and getting closer to the actuality of heaven. So it could be that Eden is the dividing point, and maybe you have to cross through that. That could be some kind of an allegory for a spiritual journey, but I'm not trying to read that into this. Like, it's not as glaringly obvious as the other stuff, so I'm not going to deal with that. Let's get into Purgatorio, Canto 30. When the septentrion of the highest heaven, which never either setting new or rising, nor veil of other cloud other than that of sin, and which made every one therein aware of his own duty, as the lower makes whoever turn the helm to come to port. Motionless, halted, the voracious people that came at first between it and the griffin, turned themselves to the car as to their peace. And one of them, as if by heaven commissioned, singing, Veni, sponso del Libiano, shouted 3 times, and after all the others, and all the others after. Even as the blessed, at their final summons, shall rise up quickened, each one from his cavern, uplifting light the reinvested flesh, so that upon the celestial chariot 100 rows ad vocem tanti sinnis, ministers and messengers of its life eternal. And they were all saying, Benedictus Cavianus, and scattering flowers above and round about, Manibus odate lilia Polinius. Here now have I beheld as day began, the eastern hemisphere all tinged with rose, and the other heaven as with fair serene adorned. And the sun's face, uprising, overshadowed so that by tempering influence the vapors for a long interval the eye sustained it. Thus, in the bosom of a cloud of flowers which from those hands angelical ascended and downward fell again, inside and out, over her snow-white veil with olive cinct, appeared a lady under a green mantle, vested in color of the living flame. And my own spirit, that already now so long a time had been that in her presence, trembling withal, it had not stood abashed. Without more knowledge having, by mine eyes, through occult virtue that from her proceeded of ancient love, the mighty influence felt. As soon as on my vision smote the power sublime that had already pierced me through, ere from my boyhood I had yet come forth. To the left hand I turned with that reliance which seemed with which the little child runs to his mother when he has fear or when he is afflicted. To say to Virgilius, not a drachma of blood remains in me that does not tremble. I know the traces of the ancient flame. But us, Virgilius of himself deprived, had left Virgilius the sweetest of all fathers, Virgilius to whom I for safety gave me. Nor whatsoever lost the ancient mother availed my cheek now purified from dew, that weeping they should not again be darkened. Dante. Because Virgilius has departed, do not weep yet. Do not weep yet a while. For by another sword thou needest must weep, even as an admiral who on poop and prow comes to behold the people that are working in other ships and cheers them to well-doing. Upon the left-hand border of the car, when at the sound I turned of my own name, which of necessity is here recorded, I saw the lady, who erewhile appeared veiled underneath the angelic festival, direct her eyes to me across the river. Although the veil from her head descended, encircled with the foliage of Minerva, did not permit her to appear distinctly. In attitude still royally majestic continued she, like unto one who speaks and keeps his warmest utterance in reserve. Look at me well. In sooth, I am Beatrice. How didst thou deign to come unto the mountain? Didst thou not know that man is happy here? Mine eyes fell downward to the clear fountain, but, seeing myself therein, I sought the grass. So great a shame did weigh my forehead down. As to the sun, the mother seemed superb, so she appeared to me, for somewhat bitter tasteth the savor of severe compassion. Silent became she, and the angels sang. Suddenly, In te domine superavi, and beyond, Fides meos, did not pass, even as the snow among the living rafters upon the back of Italy congeals, blown by the drifted and Sclavonian winds, and then, dissolving, trickles through itself whenever the land that loses whenever the land that loses shadow breathes, so that it seems a fire that melts a taper. Even thus was I without a tear or sigh before the song of those who sing forever, after the music of the eternal spheres. But when I heard in their sweet melodies compassion for me, more than had they said, O wherefore, lady, dost thou thus upbraid him? The ice that was about my heart congealed, to air and water changed, and in my anguish, through mouth and eyes, came gushing from my breast. She, on the right-hand border of the car, still firmly standing to those holy beings, thus her discourse directed afterwards. Ye keep your watch in the eternal day, so that nor night nor sleep can steal from you one step the ages make upon their path. Therefore my answer is with greater care, that he may hear me who is weeping yonder, so that the sin and dole be of one measure, not only by the work of those great wheels that destine every seed unto some end, according as the stars are in conjunction, but by the largesse of celestial graces, which have such lofty vapors for their reign, that near to them our sight approaches not. Such had this man become in his new life potentially that every righteous habit would have made admirable proof in him. But so much more malignant and more savage becomes the land untilled and with bad seed, the more good earthly vigor it possesses. Some time did I sustain him with my looks, revealing unto him my youthful eyes. I led him with me turned in the right way. As soon as ever of my second age I was upon the threshold and changed life. Himself from me he took and gave to others. Sorry. When from the flesh to spirit I ascended, and beauty and virtue were in me increased, I was to him less dear and less delightful. And into ways untrue he turned his steps, pursuing the false images of good that never any promises fulfill, nor prayer for inspiration me availed, by means of which, in dreams and otherwise, I called him back. So little did he heed them. So low he fell that all appliances for his salvation were already short, save showing him the people of perdition. For this I visited the gates of death, and unto him who so far up has led him, my intercessions were with weeping borne. God's lofty fiat would be violated if lethe should be passed, and if such viands should be tasted withouten any scot, a penitence that gushes forth in tears. And so ends Canto 30, and again, we just seem to be preparing for the passage over into heaven, right? We're dealing a little bit with the land of myth, and we're talking about things that happened in the past that are absolutely more relevant to them than to us, right? This is, you don't pass without repentance, and that appears to be pretty much all of it, right? So now we're going to dig into Purgatorio, Canto 31, and this will be the one where we wrap up for today. O thou who art beyond the sacred river, turning to me the point of her discourse that edgewise even had seemed to me so keen. She recommenced, continuing without pause. Say if this be true to such a charge, thy own confession needs must be conjoined. My faculties were in so great confusion that the voice moved, but sooner was extinct than by its organs it was set at large. A while she waited, then she said, What thinkest? Answer me, for the mournful memories in thee are not yet by the waters injured. Confusion and dismay together mingled, forced such a yes out of my mouth that sight was needful to the understanding of it. Even as a crossbow breaks when 'tis discharged, too tensely drawn the bowstring and the bow, and with less force the arrow hits the mark. So I gave way beneath that heavy burden, outpouring in a torrent of tears and sighs, and the voice flagged upon its passage forth. Whence she to me, in those desires of mine which led thee to the loving of that good, beyond which there is nothing to aspire to. What trenches lying traverse, or what chains didst thou discover, that of passing onward thou shouldst have thus despoiled thee of the hope? And what allurements and what vantages upon the forehead of the other showed that thou shouldst turn thy footsteps unto them? After the heaving of a bitter sigh, hardly had I the voice to make a response, and with fatigue my lips did fashion it. Weeping, I said, the things that present were, with their false pleasure, turned aside my steps, soon as your countenance concealed itself. And she, shouldst thou be silent, or deny what thou confessest, not less manifest would be thy fault. By such a judge 'tis known. But when from one's own cheek comes bursting forth the accusal of the sin, in our tribunal against the edge of the wheel doth turn itself. But still, that thou mayest feel a greater shame for thy transgression, and another time, hearing the sirens, thou mayest be more strong. Cast down the seed of weeping and attend. So shalt thou hear how, in an opposite way, my buried flesh should have directed thee. Never to thee presented art or nature pleasure so great as the fair limbs wherein I was enclosed, which scattered are in earth. And if the highest pleasure thus did fail thee, by reason of my death, what mortal thing should then have drawn thee into its desire? Thou oughtest verily, at the first shaft of things fallacious, to have risen up to follow me, who was no longer such. Thou oughtest not to have stooped thy pinions downward, to wait for further blows, or little girl, or other vanity of such brief use. The callow birdlets wait for 2 or 3, but to the eyes of those already fledged, in vain the net is spread or shaft is shot. Even as children, silent in their shame, stand listening with their eyes upon the ground, and conscious of their fault and penitent, so was I standing, and she said, If thou in hearing sufferest pain, lift up thy beard, and thou shalt feel a greater pain in seeing. With less resistance than a robust home, uprooted either by a native wind or else by that from the regions of Irbas, then I upraised at her command my chin, and when she by the beard the face demanded, well I perceived the venom of her meaning. As my countenance was lifted up, mine eye perceived those creatures beautiful, had rested from the strewing of the flowers. And, still but little reassured, mine eyes saw Beatrice, turned round towards the monster that is one person only in 2 natures. Beneath her veil, beyond the margin green, she seemed to me far more her ancient self, to excel than others here when she was here. So pricked me then the thorn of penitence, that of all other things the one which turned me most to its love became the most my foe. Such self-conviction stung me at the heart. I overpowered, I fell, and what I then became she knoweth who had furnished me the cause. Then, when the heart restored my outward sense, the lady I had found alone, above me, I saw, and she was saying, Hold me, hold me, up to my throat, and the stream had drawn me, and dragging me behind me, she was moving on the water lightly as a shuttle. When I was near unto the blessed shore, Asperges me I heard so sweetly sung, remember that it cannot, much less write it. The beautiful lady opened her arms, embraced my head, and plunged me underneath, where I was forced to swallow of the water. Then forth she drew me all dripping broad into the dance of the 4 beautiful, and each one with her arm did cover me. We here are nymphs, and in the heaven are stars, ere Beatrice descended to the world. We, as her handmaids, were appointed her. We'll lead thee to her eyes, but for the pleasant light that within them is, shall sharpen thine, the 3 beyond, who more profoundly look. Thus, singing, they began, and afterwards unto the griffin's breath they led me with them, where Beatrice was standing turned towards us. See that thou dost not spare thine eyes, they said. Before the emeralds have we stationed thee, whence love aforetime drew for thee his weapons. 1,000 longings, hotter than the flame, fastened my eyes upon those eyes relucent, that still upon the griffin steadfast stayed. As in a glass the sun, not otherwise, within them was the 2-fold monster shining, now at the one, now at the other. Think, reader, if within myself I marveled, when I beheld the thing itself stand still, and in its image transformed itself. While, with amazement filled and jubilant, my soul was tasting of the food, that while it satisfies us to make hunger for it, themselves revealing of the highest rank and bearing, did the other three advance, singing to their angelic saraband. Turn, Beatrice, oh turn thy holy eyes, such was their song, unto thy faithful one, who has to see thee taken so many steps. In grace, do us the grace that thou unveil thy face to him, that he may discern the second beauty which thou dost conceal. O splendor of the living light eternal, who underneath the shadow of Parnassus has grown so pale or drunk so at his cistern, he would not seem to have his mind encumbered, striving to paint thee as thou didst appear, where the harmonious heaven overshadowed thee, when in the open air thou didst unveil. And so ends Canto 31, and we are going to wrap it up here. This is interesting, right? This is, again, back into the dogma of the control systems. Now, the confession of sin is a necessary thing, right? It is something that you absolutely should be doing. When you do wrong, you should be confessing them. But the dunking in the river is not really a necessary thing, even though a lot of people believe it is. The splashing of the water, those are outward symbols of an inward faith, right? It's the same as a wedding ring. The wedding ring doesn't make you wed, right? The vows make you wed. Your commitment to the vows make you wed. The ring is to show other people that you have made the vows, that you are committed. It is an outward show of an inward change. That is what all of it is to be. Right? Every single time, it's all wrong. Even when I lead you in the prayer of confession, it is not quite right. I don't know God's heart in that manner. I am doing my best to relate to you that it is as simple as asking for forgiveness. This described the reluctance to admit the fault, right? Even after the point of ascension. But before you can reach to the heavens, you have to. You have to acknowledge the wrongs in your heart, the things that you are consistently wanting to do wrong. You have to acknowledge them. You have to address them in whatever manner you are led to do so. We are a little bit less into the esoteric and getting back into the control systems here, but that's okay because we're about to be transitioning into heaven, and I am very interested to see where that's going to lead. We only have a few cantos left into this one. The next one we will wrap this one up and start into heaven. I am sure it will work out just as the timing has intended it to. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion. There wasn't a whole lot for me to actually add to it this time, so I don't try to add things where I don't feel like there should be there. If there are things to discuss, we will discuss them. If not, I don't really talk to hear myself talk. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know down below. Hit me with a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. If you really like it, hit that super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.